I'm Marin, and this is Post-its and Pens. Hello, and welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is Marin, and here you will find a little beauty, a little books, and a little teaching content. So if that sounds like something you might like, I would love for you to subscribe and join me in my little corner of YouTube. I also have an Instagram. You can find it at Post-its and Pens, and I would love to see you over there as well. In today's video, I am going to take you through my April reading recap. Now, I typically do not read a ton of books in a month. Teaching is pretty stressful. I'm pretty tired most nights when I get home, but in April, I did manage to read 8 books, which is a lot for me. Maybe not for others, but a lot for me. So I wanted to go ahead and just give you a quick rundown of the books that I read. I will say most of them were either ebooks or library books, so I don't have the books themselves, but I will go ahead and put the picture of the cover over here for you, and I will give you a little synopsis and let you know what my thoughts were. So let's go ahead and get into the video. The first book that I finished in April was Wonder by RJ Palacio. I chose this one using a random number generator. I typed in the number 1 all the way up to the number of books that are on my to be read shelf on Goodreads, and it picked the number out, and it was Wonder. So I went ahead and gave it a read. It's been on my to read list since June 15th, 2012, and it took me until April 2nd, 2021 to finally get around to it. I did read this book over the course of 2 days. It was a very, very fast read. It is a middle grade book, and it's definitely one of those feel-good stories. It focuses a lot on being kind, which I am a big believer in. As a teacher, that's something that I try to instill in my students. I did feel like it was a little cheesy, a little over the top, but all in all, it was a nice feel-good story, and there were definitely some parts that made me tear up. It is told from multiple point of views, so you have the main point of view. The main character is August Pullman, but then there are other points of view as well throughout the story. His sister, his friend, his sister's boyfriend, they all kind of have a little piece of the story that they tell, and the narratives kind of weave together to show the full story. So I did enjoy it. It was well written. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. If it's something that you feel like you would be interested in reading, I say go for it. The second book that I read in April was Schindler's List. This was another randomly selected book. Again, I just put in the random number generator, all of the books on my TBR, and it picked the number that happened to be Schindler's List. This book has also been on my TBR since 2012, and I feel like everyone probably knows what this book is about, but I'll go ahead and just read a little recap for you. So it says, Schindler's List recreates the true story of Oskar Schindler, the Czech-born Southern German industrialist who risked his life to save over 1,100 of his Jewish factory workers from the death camps in Nazi-occupied Poland. So this is a fiction book technically, which I find interesting because it's really not fiction. Like, that did happen. It should be nonfiction. The only thing I can think of is that maybe because they were making some guesses in terms of what was actually said in conversations or what he might have been thinking, that maybe that's why they categorized it as fiction, but it is definitely a nonfiction book, and it reads like a nonfiction book. So there's quite a lot of backstory, setup, things like that. You do see into Oskar Schindler's head, but he is not the person who told his story. One of the Jewish men that he saved is actually the one who the author spoke with and got most of this information from. So I saw this movie way back when it first came out in the early 1990s, I think 1994, and I'd been curious to read the book since I saw that film. Now, mind you, I was quite young when I saw the film, so it took me until I was the age that I am now to finally get around to it, but I am glad that I read it. I think it kind of showed that he was human. He was not this, like, savior. Although he did save people, he wasn't this like perfectly good person. He definitely had his flaws and his faults, but all in all, it just shows you that regular everyday people can do amazing things if they truly want to. And we're very lucky that he did everything that he could to save his factory workers from a truly horrendous fate. So again, I would recommend it. I did give it 4 out of 5 stars, mostly because parts of it were a little slow. Like I said, it read like nonfiction, particularly when you weren't following Schindler, but when the author was giving a lot of backstory, things like that. It does jump point of views, so that was kind of confusing every once in a while. There's a lot of people to keep track of. But yeah, it was a good book, and I'm glad that I finally gave it a read and could cross it off my TBR. The third book that I read in April was the third book in the Gallagher Girls series by Allie Carter. This one was called Don't Judge a Girl by Her Cover. Now, I first started reading this series a super long time ago. I read the first 2 books probably 5 or 6 years ago, so I'd kind of forgotten a little bit about what was even going on. This book did a good job of kind of giving a recap, so I wasn't completely confused, which I did appreciate. And I was kind of surprised because this book was much darker than the first 2. So there's quite a big mystery that starts to be revealed in this book that I believe carries through the remainder of the series, and it was quite action-packed. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It's definitely a kind of progression, so not a whole lot is really solved in this book. It is the third book of, I believe, 5 or 6 books. So it was a nice setup. It definitely gets you intrigued, gets you wondering what's going on, and I'm excited to see what happens next for Cami and her friends. So I'm going to go ahead and just read you the synopsis of the first book because this one already has some spoilers, and if you're interested in reading the series, you probably don't want those spoilers. So here is a little bit about the first book. So the synopsis for the first book, which is called I'd Tell You I Love You, But Then I'd Have to Kill You, is Cami Morgan is a student at the Gallagher Academy for Exceptional Young Women, a fairly typical all-girls school. That is, if every school taught advanced martial arts and PE, and the latest in chemical warfare and science, and students received extra credit for breaking CIA codes in computer class. So basically, Cami attends a school for female spies, and we meet her and her roommates and her friends. And as I said in the third book, things really geared up and got much darker, much more mysterious, surprising, and I definitely did not see several things coming. So it's a fun series. I would definitely recommend it. And as I said, I gave book 3 4 out of 5 stars. The fourth book that I read in April was Broken Crowns by DeStefano. Now, this is the third book in her Internment Chronicles series. And full disclaimer, I read the first 2 books like 5 years ago. So I really did not remember anything that had happened in the first 2 books. This book had a little bit of recap, but not enough for me to fully remember what had happened. That being said, I don't really click with DeStefano's writing. It's very pretty, her prose is very good, but I never really connect with the characters. So it's just kind of like floating along the surface and not being invested. Like, I don't know. Her writing is just kind of like cotton candy-ish, where it's just there and then it disappears. It doesn't really leave an impact, which is why I probably couldn't remember anything from the first 2 books. This was a book that I just wanted to read to get it off my TBR and to cross another series off my TBR, as one of my goals is to really focus on series books and get those random book 3s that I have floating around gone. I mentioned in my first reading vlog when I was reading another book that I'm going to talk about here in just a minute that my focus in 2021 is to get those series off my to-read list. I'll go ahead and link that vlog up here in case you're interested and want to watch it. But basically, I just have a lot of book 3s sitting on my to-read list and I just want to get them done. I'm not super invested in a lot of them. This was one of them. It was just more a matter of the completionist in me wanting to get all the way through it. But I personally just don't love Lauren DeStefano's writing. This series was just okay. I didn't love the ending of it, and yeah. Your mileage may vary. Obviously, everyone's reading tastes are different, but for me, her writing just doesn't work, and I would not recommend this series. The fifth book that I read in April is called So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. I really liked this one. It's one that I feel like I'm going to want to go back and reread so that I can tab different things, because she really lays out how you should respond to people when the topic of race comes up, and she covers a lot. I found this book very accessible and easy to read in terms of how well you could take in the information. Obviously, the racial history of the US is not something that is an easy subject, but she at least makes it accessible in a way that makes it easier for you to see what you should say, what you should do if you mess up and make mistakes, and she just does it in a very approachable way. She doesn't pull any punches, so there probably are some things, and there were some things that make you feel uncomfortable as you're reading, but it's a very necessary topic of conversation, and I'm really grateful that she wrote this book and made it available to us. So I'm going to go ahead and I will read just a little bit of the synopsis for you, and I would really encourage you to read it if you are at all interested. So here's what she says. Widespread reporting on aspects of white supremacy, from police brutality to the mass incarceration of Black Americans, has put a media spotlight on racism in our society. Still, it is a difficult subject to talk about. How do you tell your roommate her jokes are racist? Why did your sister-in-law take umbrage when you asked to touch her hair? And how do you make it right? How do you explain white privilege to your white privileged friend? In So You Want to Talk About Race, Ijeoma Oluo guides readers of all races through subjects ranging from intersectionality and affirmative action to model minorities in an attempt to make the seemingly impossible possible. Honest conversations about race and racism and how they infect almost every aspect of American life. So yeah, as I mentioned, I highly recommend this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I am definitely going to reread it at some point to really go through and take notes, put post-its, things like that, to really take in everything she's saying, because there's a lot, but it is also very important that we pay attention. The sixth book that I read in April was actually an audiobook, and it was the audiobook of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince by J.K. Rowling. I am currently trying to finish up a reread, or I should say re-listen, of the Harry Potter series, books 1 through 7, and then the 2 Hogwarts School books this year. I have been working on the audiobooks for the past 2 years. Last year just really kind of derailed me, and I didn't make much progress in them, but this year I am going to finish the series out. Half-Blood Prince is my second favorite Harry Potter book. I think Harry's sense of humor really shines through in this one, and I love the backstory that we get to Tom Riddle. He's kind of my favorite character, I guess, in a lot of ways, just because I find him rather fascinating, and I like his history. So the fact that we got a look at his history and a little bit of his backstory in this one really made me happy. And yeah, I enjoyed the audio. I think they are very well done. I love the narrator. It is Jim Dale, because I'm in the US. I know the UK ones have a different narrator, but Jim Dale does a great job. And yeah, I just really loved the audio, and I'm looking forward to listening to the 7th book. If you're curious, my favorite Harry Potter book is the 3rd one, which is Prisoner of Azkaban. The 7th book that I read this month was another audiobook, and it was another in the Harry Potter series. It was Quidditch Through the Ages. Now, this version had some additional writing. I tend to stay away from J.K. Rowling's new Harry Potter writing just because I think it's quite frankly, ridiculous a vast majority of the time, but I did enjoy the extra writing in this one. She kind of did a history of Quidditch that she added to the end, and then she also included a write-up of the 2014 Quidditch World Cup, which I found kind of funny because you have Rita Skeeter being her usual self, and Ginny Weasley, now Ginny Potter, who is trying to commentate on the matches. So it was kind of just an interesting look at the Quidditch World Cup, and didn't really make me angry in terms of what a lot of her other writing has done. Hello, cursed child. Why? Anyway, yes. So that was my 7th book. It's a very quick audiobook. It was 3 hours, but I listened to it at a 1.25 speed, so it didn't take as long as 3 hours, and it was just a fun little story to listen to over the course of a few days. And the 8th book that I read in April was Rune and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. It is another one of those series books that I just sat on for years and didn't read for no reason whatsoever, actually, because I really liked the first 2 books, but I just never read it. So I decided to go ahead and cross it off my list this month, mostly because of the Netflix series, which I do want to watch, and I just wanted to make sure that I had read everything that the series was potentially based on. I'd already read Six of Crows and the sequel, which I'm blanking on right now, Crooked Kingdom, that's what it is. So I'd already read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom when they came out, so Rune and Rising was the only one of the original series that I was missing. So I went ahead and cranked that out over a weekend. I will link that vlog again in the cards if you would like to follow along as I read. And I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was a good wrap up to the series. I maybe didn't love the ending. But I feel like it worked out okay, and all in all, it was a very good series. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars for the 3rd book, and I'm happy that I read it. I especially love that Nikolai shows back up in this book. He is my favorite, and now that I've read Rune and Rising, I can go ahead and move on to read his series, which I am very much looking forward to. So those were the 8 books that I read in the month of April. I'm going to go ahead and put an image here with the titles, authors, and star ratings just for easier access. And yeah, I will see you next month, hopefully with another recap. Maybe I will read another 8 books. We'll see. I am currently working on 2 of them that I am hoping to have done soon. I will be participating in the Bout of Books readathon, which starts Monday, May 3rd, and I will be vlogging that for you, so you will see that video soon. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you are interested, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.